Like most of you, during quarantine, me and my wife got the itch to do some sort of renovation project. So we decided we were going to renovate our small laundry closet, whatever you call this thing. We also had a washing machine that went out, so we decided that it would be a good time to renovate this while we're waiting for our new washer and dryer to come. The first steps were obviously to unhook the washer and dryer and get everything moved out. I sold this old unit to somebody who was pretty handy with appliances that could fix it up. Then I took down the old IKEA cube shelf. These things are really nice to have, but we really just did not use it as much as we thought. In fact, most of the time these bins stayed empty. I apologize for the shortage of camera angles in this video. I really only had a very small space to be able to film in, so I apologize. Once I was all cleaned up, it was time to patch and paint some of the holes that were in the wall from the previous hangers. So I did a little bit of patchwork and then took off all the electrical plates and the connection plates to get prepped for painting. Behind the scenes of the poor man's workshop. What's up, Amy? What are you doing? Hi. What project are we working on right now?
The laundry room.
Okay. You say that like you're so unsure.
No, I just don't like being on camera.
Amy, bye. See ya. Bye. Oh, there we go. Once all the patch was dry, I did a little bit of sanding and cleaned off all the dust. I laid out some painter's paper just to make sure I didn't drip onto the tray or onto the carpet beneath, and then I started painting. Now, if you're wondering why I'm wearing a headlamp while I painted, I actually disconnected the electricity already. Off camera, I installed a new lighting fixture, but I wanted to make sure that I painted before I got that installed. Then it was time to go down to the shop and get the Butcherblock top and the shelves made. Now, I'm making the top and the shelves out of Douglas fir 2x4s. The reason I decided to do this is to keep the price low with the Butcherblock top, and this was before wood prices had gone up, so it made a lot of sense to me. I don't necessarily recommend using construction grade lumber for finished carpentry projects unless you have the means of milling and squaring up all of the lumber for your project. You also want to make sure that you allow the 2x4s enough time to acclimate to your shop, or else you're going to have a really wonky looking Butcherblock top. So, to start, I just jointed one face of each 2x4 and then went back and jointed one of the edges as well. After that, I allowed the 2x4s to acclimate to my shop for just a couple more days. And then I went back and planed the parallel side to the face that was jointed and then ripped them to 1.5 square inch strips. For this project, it was super nice to have my Alfie table. If you haven't had a chance to check out that video, go and check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, as well as you can click on the link right above right now. Once those were all cut, I let them acclimate for another day or two, just to make sure that the boards could get any movement out that they wanted to before I decided to glue them up. The glue up process is pretty basic. It's pretty much a giant cutting board. Like I mentioned before, construction lumber seems to have a little bit more of twists and turns in it. So I'm using some straight edges that will be clamped down to ensure that the boards stay plumb with each other, and some wax paper to make sure that those boards don't get glued to the top permanently. For the glue up, I decided to use Type-On 3 because it's a waterproof glue, and this is going to be around a washer and dryer, which is bound to give off a little bit of moisture. It also has a longer curing time, so it allows me to finagle the boards a little bit before the glue starts to set. Here's where I add the straight boards to ensure that all of the top is flush with each other. When using this type of wood, I recommend taking your time with this process. It'll make your life so much easier in the long run, and it'll give you a much better finished product. Now, because this top is bigger than 30 inches wide, and my planer is only a 12-inch planer, I needed to do this a total of 4 times. 3 panels make up the width of the Butcherblock top, and then the extra panel is for the matching shelves that will go above the top. It's safe to say that I was pretty much at my clamping capacity for each panel, so I had to do this multiple times over the course of a few days. This proves you can never have enough clamps in your shop. After the panels were all finished gluing up, I took my chisel and just chiseled off the excess glue, and then ran each one of the panels through my planer, making them a uniform thickness, and cutting them to a rough length on my miter saw. To make sure that there were no seams when I glued these panels together, I also jointed and trimmed up one side on the table saw. And so I had 3 great looking panels that will make up the entire Butcherblock top. After arranging them in the orientation I wanted them, I marked out where I was going to use my biscuit joiner. Now, a biscuit joiner is not necessary for this project. In fact, it adds very little stability and strength to a project like this. Really, the only reason you would use a biscuit joiner in this scenario is to make sure everything is aligned for the glue up. Then it was time to get everything glued up. But first, I had to make sure that I had long enough clamps for this. I really only have 2 clamps that are over 24 inches, but Bessie makes this really awesome extension that allows you to attach 2 clamps of shorter length to make one really long clamp. So I did that with a few of my clamps so I would have plenty for this glue up. I'll leave a link to the Bessie extension below if that's something that you're looking for. Make sure you go check it out. Again, the glue up is pretty straightforward, just gluing the 3 panels together with the biscuits included to make sure that everything was straight and aligned. This is a perfect opportunity to remind you to go and subscribe to the Poor Man's Workshop, as well as smash that notification bell. And give this video a big thumbs up if it's something that's helped you out, and leave a comment if there's something that you would have done differently. Once the Butcherblock was all glued up and finished, it was time to do a little bit of finish work on it, chiseling off some of the excess glue squeeze out. Then I started the sanding process with 80 grit sandpaper just to make sure that there were no gaps in the seams, as well as that everything was level and flush. Now, as you might notice, this board is a little wonky. Like I said, I would recommend not using construction grade material if you can. With everything that I did, it still ended with a slight cup in the middle, which made my sanding process a lot longer than I really wanted it to be. After that, I used some Starbond CA glue and activator on all of the knots just to fill them in and make sure that they wouldn't expand because of moisture or snag clothes that run along the top of this countertop. If you've never used Starbond Adhesives CA glue and activator, I highly recommend it. It's a great product and something that I use a ton in my shop. After filling all the knots, I used my orbital sander with 150 grit sandpaper to knock down the CA glue and any rough grain that's been left over. I also added a 1/8 of an inch round over to the top just to make it a little bit smoother and easier on the hands. I then finish sanded it with 220 grit sandpaper and added 2 coats of a water-based polyurethane to the top. Now, water-based polyurethane has been my go-to in my shop for a long time just because it goes on super easy. It's very, very durable, and it dries really, really quick. So I highly recommend any sort of water-based polyurethane for a quick, crystal clear finish. Now that the top is 90% finished, I moved on to working on all the shelves. I first cut the shelves to their proper length using my crosscut sled. Here's a look at the brackets that will be holding up these shelves. Once they were cut to the proper length, I gave them a round over just so that they'll have a matching look to the countertop. And I did a little bit of sanding and finished it with the water-based polyurethane just like I did with the Butcherblock countertop. Now, just like any room out there in any spec home, our laundry room is anything but square. So I had to cut the Butcherblock down a little bit to make sure that it would fit. And I did this using my track saw and straight edge. Then I also cut a pocket for where the hookups for the washer and dryer will go. Obviously, we're going to need access to these. I can't just hook it up and put the Butcherblock over the top. So I used my plunge router and a straight bit, as well as a little template to give me a really fine looking pocket, and also gave that a little bit of a round over. With that, this top is ready to be installed. I wanted the top to sit about 1.5 inches off the washer and dryer just to give it a little bit of space. So I used 2 cutoffs of plywood to just measure 1.5 inches from the top, and I transfer that measurement over to the other side of the washer and dryer. Then I used my laser leveler to make sure that my boards were all level all the way across, and then tacked a cleat in place with brad nails. Then I went back and found the studs and set the cleat permanently in place with some 2.5-inch wood screws. Then it was time for the moment of truth, making sure this top actually fit onto the cleats. It actually fit pretty well, and the pocket where the hookups go in was great. I had a little bit of a problem. It was a little long on the front, and it actually ruined my drywall. So I'll have to go back and patch and paint this, but I think that that's a sign that it's now time for a husky break.
Right on the camera.
Next, I climbed under the countertop and installed some braces that will help to support the weight of this countertop. Obviously, with a little bit of supervision from my husky superintendent. Really, the cleat should be able to hold the full weight of the Butcherblock, but it's never a bad idea to make sure you have enough support so that things don't come crashing down on top of our new washer and dryer. After that, I did a little bit of patchwork on that massive hole that I put into the side of the wall, and then moved on to installing all of the shelves. So there will be one long shelf that is on the back wall above the Butcherblock, and then 4 smaller shelves that will go on the adjacent walls, 2 on either side of the large shelf. The shelves on the side will be staggered from the top shelf, that way we can maximize our storage capacity, as well as the top shelf will actually have a clothing rod that will hang down from the bottom of the shelf. I'm using these Black L floating shelf brackets. We've used these before on other shelves and we absolutely love them. They're very modern farmhouse looking, which is pretty much our style. Here is also a pretty good look at the new lighting fixture I installed as well. Then I did the same process on the side shelves. Now to anchor these into the wall, I'm using some self-drilling wall anchors. They have a capacity of about 50 pounds a piece, which totals about 200 pounds per small shelf. We will definitely not be exceeding 200 pounds. And just in case you're wondering, yes, I did make a mistake in drilling the first 2 ones, so I had to go back and line them up and drill them again. In the famous words of Brad Rodriguez at Fix This Build That, mistakes were made. Here it's just rinse and repeat, do the exact same thing I did for the other shelves. Keep in mind all the tools and hardware that I've used are linked in the description below, so you can go check out any of that if you want to pick up the L brackets or anything else that I used in this project. And here is the pre-decorated finished look of the shelves. Looks pretty nice, huh? Next, I need to install the clothing rack, but before I could get to it, this happened.
Go, go, go. Stop. Get off me. Get off me. Stop it. Get off me. Go. Go downstairs, dude. Come on. Hey, no, go downstairs. Okay.
When a husky wants to play, there really is no letting up. So I took him outside to play for a little bit and came back and finished installing this clothing rod. Now, this is really meant to be a curtain rod, but installed it the exact same way I would a curtain rod by screwing it underneath the bottom of the shelf to allow the rod to hang instead of come off of the side of the wall. Length is also adjustable, so we can make it a little bit longer if we need to, but it's a pretty easy process to install it. Next, I made sure all my shelves on the side were plumb with each other and set screws through the bottom brackets into the shelves to make sure that they would stay and be stable. Then I did some final patch and paint work on all of the mistakes I made today and got it ready to be handed over to Joanna Gaines of the family. And once it was all decorated and we hung up some picture frames, we could finally say that this project was finished. We really love how this laundry room turned out. This space really badly needed a renovation in our minds. It wasn't a very functional laundry room before, and even though it doesn't have as much storage space as it did, everything has a place and it looks really, really nice. We're really, really happy with the way that this project turned out.